Today we're going to discuss LSU versus Iowa in the Women's National Championship and some things that led to the ultimate outcome. We're going to discuss three areas today. We're going to discuss Iowa on offense, Iowa on defense, and then the foul situation, how they impacted the game. The first thing we can notice is LSU acknowledged this. Everyone acknowledged this. Caitlin Clark is a tremendous player and is going to get decent looks from the perimeter no matter what you do. However, that being said, LSU did their best and a very good job limiting the looks that she got, not only around the perimeter, but also around the rim. So we can see first off in the perimeter, they're all over her, trying to guard her with everything they got. And Caitlin obviously still makes them pay in the situation, but they did a good job preventing those shots from getting up in the first place. The biggest difference between LSU and South Carolina and how they guarded Caitlin Clark is that right there. So here, all the time in the South Carolina game, over and over again, we saw Caitlin Clark come off a screen, get downhill, and either get to the rim or drop it off to the post for an easy layup. Whatever, getting something uncontested at the rim. Here, when Caitlin Clark comes off this, she has 5 purple jerseys that have their attention on this post area. They are trying to make sure everything that goes up here is going to be contested. Iowa does a great job finishing this contested, maybe a foul there, but great finish. This was, I think, the biggest impact in the game overall. So we can watch as Caitlin again is trying to get free. 45 is all over, forcing Caitlin to put the ball on the ground. And then as soon as Caitlin gets anywhere going downhill, what does she see? She sees 0 come off, 45 come off, and then back over here, we see help side defense immediately in the paint, which is completely polar opposite to South Carolina. So then the immediate follow-up question is, if Caitlin Clark's guarded so heavily, especially in the paint, doesn't that leave the perimeter open? And the answer is yes, it did. This represents essentially that the trade-off that LSU was willing to take is they were willing to put this extra effort on Caitlin Clark in the paint to be able to create open looks for other shooters. So right here is the perfect example. Caitlin Clark comes off the screen, gets downhill with her left hand. What does she see? She sees help from the next shooter over, which is like usually something you would try and avoid doing. But that being said, in this situation, they're willing to trade that to give up that contested three. Here is the single best example of it. We can see Iowa bringing the ball up the court. We're going to watch this defender from LSU right here. Right here, she's guarding what would be the ball in this situation. I believe it's Kate Martin bringing it up. Caitlin Clark is over here. LSU was like in the huddle prioritizing, we are going to guard Caitlin Clark no matter what. And so she drifts. Caitlin Clark is way out by the logo. Let's guard her and give up a three. Okay, so switching to the LSU side of the ball. When a big way that Iowa handled South Carolina is they put bodies in the paint to make sure there was nothing open at the rim, and they sagged off who they deemed non-shooters. They employed this same concept with LSU here, doubling what would be the post right here, leaving the shooter open. However, this time, LSU made them pay much more than South Carolina did. So I think the biggest thing is LSU was just willing to shoot these threes instead of just avoiding them, as opposed to South Carolina wouldn't even try and shoot the threes. Sometimes the idea of shooting out there, even if you're not going to shoot them at a high percentage, the threat creates offense. So while I fully embrace Iowa's concept of leaving non-shooters open in the perimeter, it does at some point in random situations come back to haunt you, because simply shooters are going to get like streaky at some points, and LSU in this game shot 64% from 3, which it's tough to beat somebody when they shoot 64% from 3. And then one concept that I don't think impacted the game a huge amount, but I was curious by, is when Iowa went to this 1-3-1, they had Caitlin Clark be the player in the middle. I'd be curious to hear coach's thoughts on why that was good or not good. Because part of the reason they went to the 1-3-1 in the first place was to avoid Caitlin Clark getting into foul trouble. But then LSU did a pretty good job of getting the ball into the middle where Caitlin Clark's going to be forced to play one-on-one-ish. And she, she can't be a full defender here because she has to be worried about getting up or picking up another foul, so she has to play off a little bit. And I thought LSU did a pretty good job of trying to put Caitlin in difficult situations through that. Like these are a couple plays back to back where they're just trying to get the ball into the middle and force Caitlin to play one-on-one, which normally I think would be good for Iowa, but when she's in foul trouble, it's dangerous. And then finally, the last thing that I think had a major impact in the game is LSU. They shot difficult shots. Like these are going left-handed. I don't know. That might be her left hand. She might be left-hand dominant, but mid-range, off the dribble, like contested twos. LSU shot them very, very well. And again, when the game is on the line here, right here, LSU and Iowa are both competing for buckets. These are challenging shots that LSU hit in crucial situations. Like that's mid-range, like the defender was getting up, contested, and LSU hit them very high consistency, especially late in the game. And then this one in particular, I was thinking in my head as it went down, I was like, well, if they're going to hit this, like there's not a whole lot else you can do on defense. Like this is good defense, and like that's a really hard shot to make. And then finally for the foul situation, so yeah, I think there were some like difficult fouls called. Like this one, like didn't do anything wrong, but the offensive player does get stuck on her foot, and so I think the ref has to call a foul in that situation. I guess the main thing I think is that when the referees like blaming the referees doesn't accomplish a whole lot as far as like an individual team. Like your team doesn't get better if you blame the referees. So one thing I will say is I think the referees probably called a little too much ticky-tack fouls, but I would argue that they called them both ways a little too ticky-tacky. Like I would prefer a game where the players are allowed to be more physical. Like this is light contact. Like I get it. She's using that to stop the momentum, but let them play a bit. Similar situation here. Like I think a lot of times the referees anticipated contact a little bit. And then one thing I want to appreciate, this I think is like the perfect example of the way to live life. Like right here, Monica gets her fifth foul, and like it's a time where a lot of people like, frankly, I'd be frustrated in this situation. She comes over and she gives encouragement to the player coming on, and like I appreciate that immensely. Like that's good. That's beautiful. So in conclusion, because of LSU's defense, the way they chose to guard the 3-point line, Iowa's defense, as well as LSU's shot making ability, especially late in the game, is why I believe the game ended up the way it did. If you're still here, feel free to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful rest of your day.